Cryptocurrency is everywhere. It's on your bus, your train, your stadium, and the countless frauds, scams, thefts, and just general bad actors have left prosecutors and investigators overwhelmed. Influencers, YouTubers, and formerly respected financial commentators have all used cryptocurrency as a way for them to profit. However, there are far more insidious elements to cryptocurrency than the financial harms. The culture surrounding cryptocurrency has created an environment optimized for political radicalization. To understand why this is, we're first going to talk about another type of scam, the Nigerian prince email scam. The classical version of this scam is that you receive an email that claims the temporarily deposed monarch of Nigeria has lost access to their vast fortune, but if you are willing to assist them by giving them a small amount of funds, then they will be able to give you a much larger portion of their fortune once they regain access. This is also called an advance fee scam and actually dates back to a much older variant called the Spanish prisoner swindle, which seemed to have first been detailed in the memoirs of the conman, and I apologize for this pronunciation, Eugene Francois Vidocq. Eugene Francois Vidocq. Eugene Francois Vidocq. One of those, probably, where he describes how the con man would tell their mark that they knew of a powerful person falsely imprisoned in Spain. The identity cannot be revealed because it would cause problems, but if you put up some funds, then you will get a portion of their fortune in gratitude. As an aside, the memoirs of conmen are fantastic reads. I also highly recommend The Yellow Kid, which describes the cons run by a Chicago conman in his own words. Seeing how confidence men operate will help you identify other scams and cons. Reading one of the Nigerian prince email scams, you will often be struck with how many spelling and grammatical mistakes this supposedly well-educated monarch makes in their attempt to convince you that this is a legitimate request for your assistance. This is by design. On the other sides of these emails are the actual scammers who are sending out thousands of these emails and then doing the work to get the people who respond to actually send money. And this process often involves multiple more steps of communication. Each person who responds to the initial email but ends up not sending money is taking up a bunch of the scammer's time and making them absolutely zero money. So by making the email absurd, both in concept and in execution, you make sure that the only people who reply and enter the pipeline are the most prone to believing absurdities. The problems in the email, the premise, which on the face seems utterly unbelievable, all help to make sure that the scammer's time is not wasted and helps make sure that their operation remains profitable. So let's bring this back to crypto. There's several different pathways that people generally follow to end up in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, and there are filters, kind of like a Nigerian prince email scam, which helps select for those who are likely to be vulnerable to radicalization and creates an environment where that can occur. Many who come to cryptocurrency are gamblers and speculators, hoping to make a buck, or if they're lucky, two. It is common amongst this group to find those who believe that the system has been rigged against honest work, who feel that the deeply unequal society we live in, that survives on the exploitation of labor, is such a manifestly unfair place that the only way to get ahead is to have the luck or skill to make the right bet. Once in crypto, these gamblers and speculators inevitably start hearing the true believers. And the true believers are largely divided into the Bitcoin true believers and the other true believers. To understand what they believe, we need to talk briefly about what cryptocurrency is uniquely good for, which is censorship resistance. Censorship resistance in the context of cryptocurrency means interactions that no central party can censor. Bitcoin is supposed to enable censorship-resistant transfers of value. Ethereum is supposed to enable other censorship-resistant financial transactions. There's other chains too, which do similar things with varying degrees of decentralization and censorship resistance. The advocates for cryptocurrency point to the places where censorship resistance can and is powerful. These will include talking about financial deplatforming and will accurately point out that this often affects marginalized individuals in society. For example, Bitcoin allows you to transfer value to a journalist in a repressive country trying to cover the regime, or to fund dissidents, or even things as simple as paying sex workers who are regularly deplatformed from other financial rails. Ethereum extends this Bitcoin conception to a variety of other financial interactions. It allows anyone to issue tokens, lend assets, create Ponzi schemes. All of these things as part of their conception of censorship-resistant finance. Now, the tricky thing with censorship resistance is that you can come up with these examples of where it seems valuable or perhaps even essential. But the challenge with that is that there are payments that society broadly wants the ability to interrupt. Society has decided they want to be able to stop payments to certain oligarchs, to Russia, to Iran. If cryptocurrency is effective for the journalist in a repressive country, then it also is effective for the oligarch in that country who is making the journalist's life hell. Crypto, at its best, when it's doing what it is uniquely good at, is an anti-state technology that, if it is effective, will bypass laws and regulations as a matter of course. It is a double-edged sword that puts it fundamentally at odds with the goals of governments broadly, and anti-government narratives are deeply embedded in crypto culture. So we end up with disaffected people who feel as though the regular system is not made for them, and they will not experience success there. They find a new place where they're free to speculate, a place where speculation is culturally appreciated, and as they feel accepted, they hear from the true believers that this is not a gamble, this is not a bet, this is powerful technology, a technology that grants freedom to the individual, freedom that the government cannot interfere with. That is a compelling narrative to our disaffected speculator. They may even begin to believe that this was never a gamble in the first place. They came here because at some level, they understood how special it was. And if they timed it well, they will seem to themselves like they're making unbelievable money, because cryptocurrencies can and have appreciated by extraordinary amounts and allowed people to make incredible sums of money. But almost inevitably, they are going to lose money in a scam. It is nearly impossible to avoid them. Just recently, we've watched a major exchange, basically all the major lenders, a massive stablecoin, several of the largest hedge funds, and more go bust. This is not even mentioning the countless rug pulls, frauds, or phishing scams that beleaguer even the most knowledgeable in cryptocurrency. So once you've been scammed in this ecosystem, do these participants suddenly recognize that perhaps some of the regulations and guardrails that existed were perhaps useful? Maybe. Some do. Others choose to take different tacks. Before you judge, remember many of these individuals truly believed they had made a life-changing amount of money, enough to pay off debts, to buy a house, to pursue a passion, and watched it all evaporate in a few moments. Many will struggle to understand this, feeling as though it is manifestly unfair. Some will blame the government, questioning why the regulators did not stop them from giving so much of their hard-earned cash to these criminals. Or, in the rare cases where the government did shut down the place they had their hard-earned cash, then that means the government is again trying to infringe on their financial freedoms. And it truly proves how important cryptocurrency really is, because the government will step in and ruin us. They will do everything in their power to stop us. Meanwhile, the crypto culture where you will have found acceptance will be whispering in your ear. FTX was not crypto. It was a centralized exchange like the old system. Celsius was not crypto. It was a centralized lender. Terra and Luna were not crypto. They were obviously flawed. True crypto is not flawed in these ways. Now, viewer, you may be wondering what the true crypto is, and the person whispering in your ear is about to try really hard to convince you they have found exactly that. If it fails, though, there will be someone else nearby to point out that it wasn't really crypto, and instead you should put your money in this thing they have been investing in. So far, we have disaffected speculators who are now surrounded by anti-government sentiment, and if they pass the filter of going bust but staying in crypto, they are now much more connected to the crypto culture and the crypto ideology. Let's circle back for a second, though, because I said before there were Bitcoin true believers and the other true believers. The Bitcoin true believers, more than the supporters of most other chains, have a tendency to believe that Bitcoin's unique properties have made it the true crypto. The very first block of Bitcoin has an allusion to the 2008 financial crisis. chancellor on brink of second bailouts for banks. And since then, Bitcoin culture has maintained a particularly intense anti-government, anti-bank, anti-regulator stance, which true believers see as their immune system, which helps protect their coin from the more pernicious attempts at regulators to control them. Those who end up in this camp will almost always talk about Bitcoin's strength as a form of hard money, which they contrast against the easy fiat money printed by central banks. And with this, we run into the part of the video that's going to be hardest, because there are a variety of people in Bitcoin and crypto broadly with a variety of beliefs of varying sincerity, and so I will inevitably generalize. I am doing my best to depict patterns I have seen, but they will not describe everyone. That's how this works. Austrian economics, especially that of Ludwig von Mises. One of those is probably right. Looked at money as a matter of supply and demand. And so Ludwig's work now generally leads to people convincing themselves the best monies are those that are in somewhat short supply. This will lead some to advocate for a return to the gold standard because there's a finite amount of gold, and leads Bitcoiners to advocate for a new gold standard, with gold replaced by the new digital gold, Bitcoin. Now, I am thoroughly convinced that a return to the gold standard or anything like it would be devastating for society. But that is beyond the scope of this video. So feel free to argue about how a gold standard is great in my comments to boost this video in the algorithm. But the more problematic aspect that tends to follow these hard money communities is an epidemic of anti-Semitism. It does not take long spending time among these communities for you to hear how central bankers are behind all of the world's problems, to see Bitcoin politicians amplifying anti-Semites, to see outright racism and anti-Semitism from people in the community. Many of these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories revolve around the idea that Jewish people control the media and the banks and the system as a whole. And so they will use these individuals' openness to these anti-government and anti-system ideas to convince them the real target of their ire are the Jewish people. Many end up deeply radicalized by first stewing in these anti-government conspiracies and then becoming convinced there are these easy targets for their anger, but it's misplaced. Then there are several feedback mechanisms that have helped make sure that these radical views are overrepresented in these communities. The first is that Bitcoin was first truly useful as a tool to buy drugs online, which means the initial people who purchased and used Bitcoin disproportionately were people interested in purchasing drugs online, which generally are going to be individuals with less respect or appreciation for regulations, and people who will almost certainly have an anti-government bent. Because crypto is censorship resistant and also speculative, it has also ended up as a dumping ground for a variety of other grifters and their vulnerable and deficient followers. Andrew Tate's Hustlers University contains a unit on trading cryptocurrency for fun, but most importantly, to get a Lambo. And he accepted Bitcoin for his War Room subscriptions. Quick note to any Andrew Tate fans who have somehow managed to watch this far into this video. The Matrix was a movie made by two trans sisters about their experience taking the red pill and transitioning. The Matrix was never about weaponizing misogyny to appease your insecurities. You were lied to by a human trafficker, and the best thing you can do now is accept that and begin to do the internal work to deconstruct why you ended up in that place. Returning, you have grifters and criminals like Tate who dump their followers into cryptocurrency. And Tate specifically is using a similar anti-government message to help make his followers compliant by claiming he was attacked by the Matrix. Then we have the examples of people deeply connected to the political apparatus who recognize cryptocurrency as a tool for them to engage in illegitimate actions. I did a video recently on organic fresh coin, where Republicans in Florida created an inauthentic initial coin offering with the government of Belarus, which certainly looked like money laundering. These individuals were interested in cryptocurrency and its censorship resistant as a tool for them to advance their ends. They're believers in cryptocurrency in the sense that they see these cryptocurrency ideas of enabling them to evade the law as useful. And that, again, is part of the double-edged sword of censorship resistance. But these individuals, their public advocacy for cryptocurrency is not centered around the thing cryptocurrency is useful for, which is being able to evade these laws and regulations. They instead say, this is about financial freedom. This is about disintermediation. They will take these narratives spun by the true believers in cryptocurrency and use it to advocate for broader acceptance, to make it easier for them to perpetrate their crimes. Then you start moving out to some of the other government advocates of cryptocurrency, even just sticking with Florida for now. You end up with Joel Greenberg at the Seminole Tax County's collector's office, a convicted fraudster who started a fire trying to do Bitcoin mining in his office. He employed people in that office, like Samuel Arms, who contributed much of the strategy to the 1776 insurrection plan. You move to Miami, and you have the Queen of Miami, Erica Flores, or Erica Gemma, a cryptocurrency venture capitalist who was advocating for cryptocurrency in Florida, who allegedly was responsible for passing that insurrection plan from Samuel Arms to Enrique Tarrio of the Proud Boys. These political radicals have recognized that cryptocurrency is useful for their end and have been broadly advocating for more acceptance of it in the government and elsewhere because it makes it easier for them to use it for the things they want to use it for, not necessarily because they truly think this type of disintermediation is useful, beyond the fact that it's useful to them to do these crimes. Then we have the more egregious examples, like the crypto-flirtatious Stephen Bannon, who also runs what is definitely not a brainwashing camp in Europe. Look at it. Why would he have a monastery in Europe and then use it for brainwashing? It's definitely totally legitimate, non-brainwashing things, at least most of the time. Then we see other figures who end up being part of these radicalization pipelines who end up seeming to adopt Bitcoin because it has become this kind of diffuse narrative surrounding many of the people they are close with. So you have Jordan Peterson, a psychiatrist, psychologist, nut job, whatever, talking about Bitcoin's utility. And so other individuals who are coming down the radicalization pipelines from other places end up getting introduced to cryptocurrency, and if that takes, they end up in this culture where these ideas are deeply embedded. Then when you realize that crypto is full of people who have already proven vulnerable to scams, you understand why someone without morals could have the ability to quickly profit in this industry. And once you understand that, it becomes very easy to see why Donald Trump has switched his stance from...
Do you ever dabble in Bitcoin or cryptos?
I don't. I like the currency of the United States. I think I think the others are potentially a disaster waiting to happen.
And is now selling mail order steaks. No, that's not right. He is now selling fake college degrees. Wait, wrong again. What was it? Oh yeah, Trump is now selling trading cards on the blockchain using stolen stock images. So now, some of Trump's fan base are newly to crypto, and the composition of crypto becomes a little more radical. Let's tie some of these threads together into something a little more intelligible. Cryptocurrencies make extravagant promises, like the 20% yield promised by Anchor, Celsius saying that it was safer than a bank while being allegedly a Ponzi scheme. They promise incredible yield, wealth, freedom, and more. Nigerian prince scams promise you a portion of their fortune. Many of the schemes in cryptocurrency, like Terra, Luna, and Anchor, are blatantly broken. Like the scam email is intentionally bad, so that only the most vulnerable are attracted. Crypto, because it is not just scams, has communities and culture that people end up embedded in. And among those communities, you end up with many of these radicalizing ideas percolating around them. And the prevalence of scams in crypto mean at some point you will likely end up even more angry and vulnerable than you were when you were initially attracted to it. This is why I say that cryptocurrency can act as a Nigerian prince email scam for radicalization, because it filters out those who would be resistant to that messaging and disproportionately attracts those who will be vulnerable to it. The other aspect that cannot be forgotten with that is that these same radical entities benefit greatly from the existence of things like Bitcoin, because if they end up targeted by the trans matrix, then they will need a way to continue funding their fear-mongering and censorship-resistant payment rails and financial infrastructure potentially allow them to do that. Alex Jones has received a meaningful amount of the funding for InfoWars in Bitcoin. They have the vulnerable people and the tools they need all in one place. This has created the perfect funnel and environment for this type of radicalization. Now, as we wrap this up, I do want to be clear that not everyone in cryptocurrency is radicalized, and that many do honestly believe that financial freedom is such a fundamental goal that the negative effects are comparatively far less important. I think this is a defensible stance. I think it is defensible to say that the government should not be able to stop some of these payments. There are many who gamble on tokens, find their community, and do not end up involved in any attempts to overturn elections or overthrow the government. But the nature of cryptocurrency and the culture around it has become an ideal vessel for radicalization.